The blizzard still howls over the Montana ridge, erasing blood, footprints, and truth all at once. A single word carved into the ice, help, becomes the beginning of a war no one was meant to see. When Navy SEAL Ethan Cole follows the trail with his German Shepherd Rex, he uncovers a secret buried beneath snow and silence. A hidden base, a corporation that kills to stay unseen, and a file worth dying for. Engines roar in the distance. Shadows move through the white. And somewhere in that storm between faith and vengeance, a miracle waits to be found. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more tales of courage, loyalty, and the light God hides in the storm. The wind over the Rocky Mountains howled like a wounded beast, dragging sheets of snow across a white wilderness where sound itself seemed to die. The kind of silence that didn't comfort, it stalked. Beneath that silence moved Ethan Cole, a Navy SEAL whose face had long forgotten softness. His eyes, an Arctic gray, scanned every shadow between the trees. 38, lean, weathered, his short brown hair carried a frost that had little to do with the cold. Years of combat had carved quiet discipline into every motion. He didn't waste steps or words or trust. Since the Kabul incident 3 years ago, when his team's extraction went wrong and only 2 made it out, Ethan had carried silence like a second weapon. He didn't fear danger, he feared stillness, the moment before the next loss. Beside him padded Rex, his 7-year-old German Shepherd, trained for both combat and rescue. The dog's black and tan coat stood out sharply against the snow, his breath rising in small, steady clouds. Rex was large, nearly 90 pounds of muscle and instinct, but his eyes carried the gentle watchfulness of an old soul. Once part of the Navy's K-9 unit, Rex had saved lives Ethan could never repay. They shared the kind of bond that only forms in chaos, one built not on words, but on the mutual trust of 2 survivors. It had been 48 hours since the last radio ping from Research Camp Orion, a small civilian team conducting weather pattern studies in this region. The blizzard had cut all communications. Command ordered a reconnaissance sweep. Ethan volunteered before the sentence ended. He didn't say it aloud, but he wasn't here just for a rescue. Something about the coordinates, off-grid near old military land, itched at him. Rex suddenly stopped. The hair along his spine bristled. Ethan's hand instinctively found the grip of his rifle as he crouched. The snow ahead was disturbed, tracks, faint but fresh, running parallel to the tree line. Not animal, vehicle. He brushed the snow aside, uncovering deep, square treads, military-grade tires. He followed the pattern a few steps before Rex began to whine low in his throat and paw at something half buried near the trail. Ethan cleared the snow and found a crumpled scrap of paper stained with frozen blood. It was torn, the edges stiff with ice. He unfolded it carefully. One word, jagged and desperate, was written in smeared red ink. Help. He stared at it for a long time, feeling the letters burn through the cold. The handwriting was shaky, hurried. Whoever wrote it had been dying or terrified. His breath fogged the air, shallow and slow. The ink wasn't ink at all. It was blood. Human. He slipped the note into a waterproof pouch and rose, scanning the tree line again. The tracks veered west toward the foothills. X, he murmured. Track. The dog moved instantly, nose to the ground, tail stiff. They followed the trail through the snow for miles, the light dimming into a steel-gray dusk. The storm eased, but the world remained colorless. Gray trees, white sky, the black silhouette of a man and his dog crossing between them. By the time they reached the open clearing, the last of the sun had bled out behind the ridges. There, half hidden beneath a drift, stood what looked like an emergency shelter, a cluster of canvas tents and metal storage units arranged in a hasty circle. The American flag stitched to the main tent was shredded by the wind. No movement, no heat signatures on his scanner. The place was abandoned. Ethan approached cautiously, rifle raised. The first tent was empty. Broken cots, a toppled heater, papers scattered across the frozen ground. He found a mug still half full of coffee, now solid ice. Whoever had been here left in a hurry. He was about to check the next tent when Rex let out a low growl and positioned himself between Ethan and the eastern side of the camp. Something glinted near a supply crate. Ethan moved closer and found a small metal badge lying in the snow, an emblem shaped like a spiral surrounded by faint lettering, Whisper Base. He frowned. The name was familiar. Whisper Base wasn't military. It was an independent humanitarian organization rumored to protect whistleblowers and witnesses involved in classified projects. It had no official funding, no headquarters, and a long list of enemies. If this badge was here, then this research camp was no weather station. Ethan's mind raced. Helix Corp, the biotech giant he'd heard whispered about during his deployment in Syria, was rumored to run covert field experiments in isolated regions. Chemical trials, population tracking, drone surveillance, nothing ever proven. Until now. A faint sound broke his thoughts, a creak of snow under weight. Ethan froze, eyes narrowing. Rex turned sharply, ears up. From behind a stack of supply barrels, a figure emerged slowly, arms half raised, not hostile. He was tall, in his 50s, dressed in a heavy brown coat, patched at the elbows. His face was lined and lean, the kind that had weathered too many winters and too many lies. Gray stubble traced his jaw, and his eyes, sharp and blue like fractured ice, studied Ethan carefully. "Easy," the man said, voice rough but steady. "You're not with them, are you?" "That depends," Ethan replied, rifle steady. "Who's them?" The man took another step, hands visible. "Name's Marcus Hale. Used to run operations for Whisper Base before Helix Corp tore us apart." He nodded toward the badge in Ethan's hand. "Guess you found what's left of my people." Ethan's grip on the rifle eased slightly. Marcus looked like a man carved from regret. Tough, deliberate, but carrying the kind of sadness that came from outliving his purpose. "You're military," Marcus observed quietly. "Special forces, by the look of it. They send you to clean this up or to find the truth." "I'm here for missing civilians," Ethan said. Marcus gave a bitter smile. "Then you're already too late. The civilians were just cover. Helix Corp's been testing something out here. They called it Project Artemis. Most of the team vanished before they could tell the world." Ethan felt the old chill of war move through him again, the cold that wasn't from snow but from knowing death had already passed this way. "And the one who wrote that note?" he asked. Marcus looked at the horizon, where the storm clouds gathered like smoke. "Probably the last one who tried to run." The two men stood in the growing darkness, the wind carrying the faint rattle of a loose tent flap. Rex paced between them, restless. Marcus finally spoke, his voice lower now, heavy. "If you really want answers, there's an old warehouse near the Valley Road. Helix used it before they disappeared. Whisper Base still monitors the area, but no one's been brave or foolish enough to go back. Whatever you're looking for, it's there." Ethan studied the man, weighing every word. Marcus didn't flinch under his stare. His eyes carried too much exhaustion to lie. The SEAL in him recognized another veteran's truth, the weariness of someone who'd fought a war no one believed in. Snow began to fall again, thicker this time. Ethan tightened his coat, glanced once at the torn tents, then back at Marcus. "Then that's where I'll start." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then you better move before dark really hits. Out here, night doesn't fall, it hunts." Ethan gave a short nod. "Thanks for the warning." Marcus's gaze lingered on Rex for a moment, a faint smile softening the weathered lines on his face. "Good dog," he murmured. "He'll see you through." As Ethan and Rex turned toward the descending trail, the wind picked up, moaning through the dead trees like the voices of those lost. The snow swallowed their tracks almost instantly. Behind them, Marcus watched until they vanished, his silhouette fading into the white storm. Then he turned back to the empty camp and whispered something only the wind could hear. Far ahead, the road bent into darkness. Rex suddenly froze again, his ears twitching toward the tree line. Ethan followed his gaze. There, half hidden by the snowdrift, was the faint outline of a vehicle, still warm, its headlights dimmed, engine idling. Someone had been waiting for them, and they weren't alone anymore. The storm had dulled into a fine mist of snow when Ethan Cole reached the valley road. His breath came out in controlled bursts, each one fading into the white quiet. Rex trotted beside him, paws soundless over the powder. The faint hum of an engine had long since vanished. Whoever had been watching them at Whisper Base was gone or waiting. Ethan's instincts whispered the same word they always did before trouble: observe, don't react. The warehouse Marcus mentioned stood at the far end of a frozen service road, where the mountains curved like a broken jaw around a basin of ice. It looked abandoned, no power, no lights, roof sagging under decades of snow. But the tire marks out front were too recent, and the snow piled at the doorway had been shoveled away just hours before. Ethan crouched, brushing a gloved hand across the ground. Boot prints, 2 sets, one large, heavy, the other smaller, lighter, spaced close together. One man, one woman, maybe. He gestured for Rex to hold position, then drew his sidearm and eased the door open. The hinges shrieked faintly, a sound too human in the dead cold. Inside, the air was stale, metallic. Shafts of pale light fell through cracked panels in the ceiling, cutting across rows of crates stamped with faded military serials. Dust hung in the air like old ghosts. Something shifted in the shadows near the back. Ethan froze. "Show yourself," he said quietly. A pause, then a low, hoarse voice answered, "Don't shoot." From behind a stack of crates emerged a woman, late 30s, tall, her figure lean under a heavy parka. Her cheeks were hollow, skin pale from exhaustion, and cold. Sarah Winters, as she later introduced herself, had the posture of someone used to command but forced into retreat. Her dark brown hair was tied back in a loose braid, streaked with silver, and her eyes, green and sharp, never stopped moving. Even now she scanned Ethan's weapon, his insignia, his stance. "You're military," she said, "but not theirs." "That depends who they are," Ethan replied, lowering the weapon slightly. "Helix Corp," she said flatly. The name hung in the cold air like poison. Ethan studied her, trying to read what years had done to her composure. Sarah looked like someone who had spent too long in survival mode, one foot still planted in a life she used to have, the other already buried in secrecy. You worked for them, he said finally. Her mouth tightened, a small tremor of regret passing through it. I designed containment protocols for Project Artemis, she confessed. When I realized what they were actually testing, I tried to walk away. People who do that don't usually make it far. Ethan holstered his weapon. You wrote the note? Sarah shook her head slowly. No, that wasn't me. That was... She stopped herself, eyes flicking toward the far corner of the warehouse. You should see this. Ethan followed her to a makeshift workstation. A folding table cluttered with papers, a small generator humming weakly beside a flickering lamp. On the table lay a digital recorder, its battery indicator red. Sarah pressed play. Static hissed. Then a man's voice crackled through, breathy, panicked. This is Dr. Anders. Artemis site compromised. They know. Containment breach. The rest dissolved into white noise and the faint, distant bark of dogs. Sarah shut it off. That was recorded 2 nights ago, she said quietly. He was trying to reach Whisper Base. Ethan's jaw tensed. Marcus sent me here because he knew someone was still alive. She nodded. Maybe, or maybe he wanted you to see what we found. From a nearby crate, she pulled a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a small metallic cylinder, scorched at one end. What's that? Ethan asked. Sample tube. Helix uses them to transport test compounds. She placed it under the lamp. This one's cracked. When I found it, the air around it was cold enough to frost glass. It wasn't weather, it was chemical. Ethan leaned closer. The cylinder had faint etchings along its side, not serial numbers, but letters burned into the metal. A3V. His military training kicked in. Helix had been subcontracted years ago for classified thermal agents. The connection twisted in his gut like wire. If they were experimenting out here, he said, why use civilians? Sarah looked at him then, not as a soldier, but as someone weighing whether to tell him something that could kill them both. Because Project Artemis isn't about defense, she said. It's about control. They found a way to rewrite cellular responses to cold, turn temperature into a weapon. The human body can freeze from the inside out while the air stays warm. Her voice broke slightly. They called it adaptive cryogenesis. But it's not adaptation, it's extermination. The lamp flickered. Ethan caught movement in the reflection, Rex stiff and alert, ears pricked toward the entrance. The dog gave a low, rumbling growl. Someone's outside, Ethan whispered. Sarah grabbed a small pistol from the table, her hand steady despite the fear in her eyes. Ethan motioned for silence. They crouched behind a stack of crates as footsteps crunched through the snow. A man entered, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing tactical winter gear with no insignia. His rifle was suppressed, his helmet visor tinted black. He moved with precision, scanning the room like someone who already knew what he'd find. Ethan's mind cataloged details. Stance, military, breathing, measured, uniform, custom, private contractor issue, Helix. The man paused near Sarah's workstation. His gloved hand reached for the cylinder. Ethan moved before thought could interfere. 2 silent strides, a swift strike. His forearm slammed into the man's neck, cutting off the sound, while Rex lunged, locking jaws around the intruder's arm. The man staggered, gun clattering to the floor. Ethan's voice was ice. "Who sent you?" The intruder only smiled under his mask, blood seeping between his teeth. "You're too late," he rasped. "They've already moved the test site." Then, before Ethan could react, he triggered a small device clipped to his vest. A sharp beep, then a burst of white smoke filled the air. blinding, chemical, searing the lungs. Rex barked wildly. Sarah coughed, covering her face. Ethan dragged her toward the exit as the smoke thickened. "Go!" he shouted. They stumbled into the cold night, collapsing behind a snowbank just as the warehouse erupted in a dull, concussive whump. The roof sagged inward, flames licking through shattered panels. Sarah gasped, eyes watering. Everything in there gone. Ethan stared at the burning structure, jaw clenched. Not everything. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the small recorder she'd shown him earlier. This still has his voice. That means the truth's still alive. Rex whined softly, pressing against his side. Sarah turned toward the distant ridge, where faint lights now flickered through the storm. Headlights, multiple vehicles approaching. "They're coming back to finish it," she said, fear creeping into her tone. Ethan stood, checking his rifle, voice steady. "Then we don't wait to be found." "Where can we go?" she asked. He met her gaze, the ghost of a plan already forming in his mind. "Marcus said Whisper Base still monitors the region. If they're still out there, they'll know where Helix moved their site." Sarah nodded, clutching her coat tight. Behind them, the warehouse collapsed in a hiss of steam and ash, the firelight painting their faces in orange scars. They started toward the ridge, their shadows stretching long across the snow. Somewhere in the distance, a low mechanical drone began to hum, a sound Ethan recognized immediately. Helicopters, not rescue. He looked up, eyes narrowing. "They found us!" Above the falling snow, black shapes broke through the clouds, 3 aircraft sweeping low, their searchlights slicing through the storm like blades. Rex barked once, sharp and urgent. Ethan raised his weapon, heart pounding not from fear but focus. "Move, Sarah," he said, voice calm and deadly. "Run." And as the first spotlight locked onto them, the mountain night exploded in white fire. The helicopters came out of the storm like black sharks breaking through waves of snow, their rotors slicing the night into fragments of sound and wind. Ethan Cole didn't look up. He didn't need to. He had heard that rhythm before, the heavy mechanical heartbeat of pursuit. "Move!" he barked to Sarah Winters, grabbing her arm and pulling her into the tree line. Rex, the German shepherd, sprinted ahead, his breath forming bursts of vapor in the freezing air. The forest swallowed them, branches whipping their faces as they stumbled over roots hidden beneath snow. The first flare burst overhead, white light spilling across the woods. Ethan pressed Sarah down behind a fallen log. Her face was pale beneath the dirt and frost, her lips blue, eyes darting wildly between the lights above. "They won't stop," she gasped. "Helix never stops once they deploy field recovery units." Ethan looked at her. This wasn't panic. It was memory. Sarah had seen this before. "Then we make them stop," he said simply. They crawled forward through the snow. Ethan's mind worked like a compass under fire, calculating direction, cover, and the rhythm of the searchlights. Rex's low growl vibrated through the air, a warning. The beam of a floodlight swept across the trees, catching for an instant the glint of Ethan's rifle barrel, before moving on. He held his breath. The sound of boots crunching snow grew closer. 2 figures appeared, mercenaries in black winter gear, visors down, rifles fitted with infrared scopes. Ethan watched their formation, too tight, too confident. He motioned to Sarah to stay still, then whispered to Rex, "Circle left." The dog vanished into the white haze. One of the mercenaries turned suddenly, hearing something, a soft whine of movement. Rex lunged out of the dark, slamming into the man's arm. The gun went off, a flash of orange in the cold. Ethan rolled, silent and swift, and fired once. The second man fell before he could even shout. Sarah flinched at the echo, clutching her coat tighter. Ethan moved to her, checking the path ahead. "We've got seconds before they triangulate that shot," he said. "We move north. The ridge will block their signal." She nodded, trying to steady her breathing. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "You kill without hesitation." Ethan gave her a sharp look. "Because hesitation kills." Then softer, "Don't mistake survival for cruelty." They kept moving uphill. The storm thickened, snow swirling like ash. Through the blizzard, faint lights flickered in the distance, what looked like the outline of a ranger's outpost, long abandoned. It was a squat wooden structure half buried by ice, a relic from the old fire watch days. "We can take cover there," Ethan said. Sarah hesitated, glancing at the sky where the drones now buzzed like mechanical hornets. "If they have heat sensors, they'll find us anywhere open," Ethan cut her off. "Inside, we have a chance." They reached the cabin minutes later. The door was frozen shut. Ethan slammed his shoulder against it until it cracked open. Inside, the air was stale, but still. Rex padded around, sniffing the corners, then sat by the window, tail twitching, a silent sentry. The room was cluttered with old gear, a broken radio, cans of fuel, and a steel cabinet that had long since rusted shut. Sarah collapsed onto a bench, her hands trembling from cold and fear. Ethan knelt by the window, watching the distant flickers of movement, men in formation, closing in. "Who else worked on Artemis?" he asked quietly. Sarah's eyes met his. "Dr. Anders, Dr. Kwan, a logistics officer named Ben Rourke. He coordinated security shipments. They all disappeared when the first phase went wrong." She hesitated, her voice softening. "Ben wasn't Helix. He was ex-military like you. He tried to protect us. When they came for the team, he stayed behind to buy us time. I thought he was dead." Ethan absorbed that in silence. There was something in her tone, a mix of guilt and longing. "If he's alive," he said, "he'd be the only one who knows how to stop whatever they're building." Sarah nodded slowly. "Helix used to call him a logistical anomaly. He could move anything, anywhere, unseen. If he's out there, he won't stay hidden for long." The wind howled outside, the sound like screaming metal. Then Rex's ears twitched. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Ethan grabbed his rifle and looked out the window. A shape moved through the snow, then another. The forest was full of shadows, some real, some imagined. But one was distinct. A tall man, heavy coat, hood drawn low, walking alone through the blizzard straight toward the cabin. Sarah tensed. "Helix?" Ethan shook his head, too calm for a hunter. He aimed, but didn't fire. The man reached the porch, paused, then knocked twice. Ethan gestured for silence, raised his rifle, and opened the door an inch. The man outside was in his 40s, broad-shouldered, with a salt-and-pepper beard and dark eyes that carried both authority and fatigue. His right hand was gloved, but the left sleeve was torn and bloodied. "Easy," he said, voice gravelly. "I'm not with them." Ethan studied him. "Name?" "Ben Rourke," the man replied. Sarah gasped, half standing. "Ben?" He managed a weary smile. "You still attract trouble, Sarah." Ethan let him in, but kept his weapon close. Rourke looked like a man dragged through a storm of years. His once clean uniform was torn, his breath ragged. "I've been following Helix movements for months," he said. You must be the seal Marcus mentioned. He said if anyone could find the truth, it'd be you. Marcus. The name hit like a spark in the dark. You spoken to Marcus? Ethan asked. Not recently, Rourke said grimly. Whisper Base was compromised. A raid 2 nights ago. He and his team scattered. Helix wants the hard drive. Everything about Project Artemis. Sarah's face went white. Then they'll come for us next. They already are, Rourke said. You two just lit up their comms when the warehouse went down. They think you're carrying something critical. His eyes flicked to Ethan's chest pocket. And they're right. Ethan took out the recorder. This is all that's left. Rourke's expression hardened. Then we protect it. But first, we need to move. Where? Ethan asked. There's a signal station east of here, Rourke explained. Old Cold War relay point. Whisper Base used it as a fallback. If we can reach it, we can broadcast the data to every channel Helix can't jam. Outside, the wind roared louder, the sound of engines. Closer this time. Rourke's voice dropped. We won't make it on foot. I have a snowcat hidden about a mile out, but they're between us and it. Ethan nodded slowly, eyes narrowing. Then we draw them off. Sarah stepped forward. That's suicide. Not if they think I'm you, Ethan said. She looked at him, startled. You can't. Rourke cut in, voice firm. He's right. They're tracking heat signatures and movement. If he goes one way, we take the recorder the other. It might buy us time. Ethan met Sarah's eyes. For a moment, the storm outside seemed to pause. She saw something in him. Calm certainty. The kind that only comes from men who've already made peace with danger. He turned to Rourke. Get her to that station. And you? Rourke asked. Ethan gave a small, grim smile. I'll be the ghost in their crosshairs. Before Sarah could protest, Rex barked once, sharp and commanding. Ethan knelt, resting a hand on the dog's head. You stay with them, boy, he whispered. Rex whined, torn, then pressed his nose against Ethan's glove, a soldier's farewell. Outside, the snow glowed with the sweep of searchlights. Ethan stepped into the blizzard, his figure swallowed by the white night. Behind him, the cabin door closed and the sound of engines grew into thunder. Somewhere deep in the storm, a voice crackled over a Helix radio. Target acquired. Move in. The last thing Sarah saw through the window was a flare exploding above the trees, painting the sky red. And Ethan didn't look back. The snowstorm had turned savage, erasing every trail within minutes. Ethan Cole crouched behind a ridge, his breath slow and even, the white camouflage of his SEAL uniform blending him into the landscape. His face was streaked with frost, but his eyes, sharp, gray, and unflinching, scanned every flicker of movement through the snow. The storm was his ally now. He could feel the hum of helicopters fading in the distance. They had lost visual contact, at least for the moment, but he knew Helix Corp didn't give up. They adapted, recalibrated, and hunted again. He reloaded his rifle with quiet precision. Years of combat had taught him that fear was just a form of noise, and he had learned long ago how to live in silence. A soft crack echoed nearby. Ethan's body tensed. He turned his head slightly. A dark shape moved behind the trees, one of Helix's recon units, methodical, scanning the area with a thermal scope. The man was tall, armored in black tactical gear, with a glowing blue visor. His movements were too clean, too disciplined. Former military, probably special ops turned mercenary. Ethan waited until the wind screamed again, masking sound, then moved. A flash of white against white. He tackled the man from the side, dragging him into the snow. The struggle was brutal and short. The knife went in beneath the collar just under the plate. The mercenary went still. Ethan laid the body down gently, his breath steady. He checked the gear. Encrypted radio, sidearm, ration pack. Then something unusual. A wrist display showing active coordinates. Helix's digital map. Ethan wiped the snow off and saw multiple red dots closing in around a single mark. His position. He exhaled through his teeth. So they're still watching. He turned the tracker off and smashed the visor with the butt of his rifle. No witnesses, no signals. He had to keep moving, north toward the ridge where Sarah, Rex, and Ben Rourke were supposed to make their way to the signal station. He didn't know if they'd made it yet. He didn't know if they were even alive. But faith, to Ethan, wasn't belief. It was motion. He moved because stopping meant surrender. The storm broke briefly, revealing a valley below, a river frozen solid lined by skeletal trees. In the distance, 2 headlights cut through the fog. A vehicle. Ethan dropped to his stomach, watching. It wasn't Helix. The movement was cautious, jerky. Civilian or local ranger. He took out his binoculars. Through the swirling snow, he caught sight of an old snowcat painted dull green. At the wheel sat a man bundled in heavy layers, his face hidden by goggles and scarf. The passenger, a young woman with short blonde hair, perhaps in her 20s, looked half-conscious. Ethan's instincts screamed conflict, a trap or survivors. He moved closer, keeping low. The snowcat's engine coughed and died. The man jumped out, banging the hood, cursing under his breath. His voice was rough, southern. Damn. Thing froze again. He pulled off his goggles, revealing a square-jawed face weathered by sun and hardship. His beard was flecked with ice. His name, stitched faintly on his jacket, read Tucker Briggs. Ethan stepped out from behind a drift, rifle raised but steady. "Don't move!" Tucker spun, startled but not terrified. "Easy, friend. You military?" Ethan didn't answer. "Who's in the vehicle?" The girl stirred. "She's hurt," Tucker said, voice tight. "Found her wandering near the ridge. No coat, half frozen. Said something about a base. Whisper or something." Ethan's pulse quickened. "You brought her here?" "Couldn't just leave her to die." Ethan approached the vehicle. Inside, the girl's lips were pale, her skin frost-bitten. Her eyes fluttered open, bright hazel beneath lashes dusted with snow. You're not Helix," she whispered. "No," Ethan said, soft but firm. "Who are you?" "Lena Torres," she murmured. "Research assistant. Whisper base. She coughed violently, gripping his sleeve. "They found us. Marcus tried to hold them off." Ethan's gut turned to stone. Marcus Hale, alive, fighting back. If Lena had escaped, then Whisper Base had fallen harder than he thought. He glanced at Tucker. "How far is the nearest shelter?" "Old Ranger Station back west, maybe 4 clicks," Tucker said. "We can make it if the storm doesn't turn again." Ethan nodded. "You're driving. Keep the lights low." They piled into the snowcat, the engine groaning to life. The cabin smelled of oil and frost. Tucker drove with steady confidence, his calloused hands gripping the wheel. Ethan sat beside him, rifle across his knees. Lena shivered in the back, bundled in Ethan's spare jacket. After a few minutes, Tucker broke the silence. "You look like a man used to command." "I used to follow orders," Ethan said quietly. Tucker gave a faint grin. "Guess neither of us does anymore. Used to be a lineman for the highway patrol. Lost my brother in Iraq. Never did like men in suits telling me who to save." Ethan studied him, a man roughened by grief, but not broken. Tucker Briggs was the kind who carried his wounds like badges, not excuses. There was something honest about him, an old-world decency that the battlefield hadn't erased. The radio on the dash crackled suddenly, a voice sharp and clipped. "Sector 6, movement confirmed. Target traveling with 2 hostiles and a green snowcat." Ethan's jaw tightened. They've got us. Tucker didn't hesitate. Hold on. He turned hard, the treads biting through the snow as flares exploded behind them. A drone swooped overhead, searchlight slicing through the storm. Ethan fired through the roof hatch. 2 clean shots. The drone spun out, trailing smoke into the darkness. "Nice shooting," Tucker muttered. "Keep going!" Ethan shouted. The snowcat roared across the frozen river, ice cracking under its weight. Lena screamed as the back end fish-tailed, but Tucker gritted his teeth, forcing it forward. Bullets whined past them, Helix troopers closing in on snowmobiles. Ethan reloaded, firing in controlled bursts, hitting 2 riders before they could flank. Then a deafening crack tore through the night. The ice beneath them split. The snowcat lurched, one tread sinking into freezing water. Tucker slammed the throttle, but the engine sputtered. "She's done!" he yelled. "Out!" Ethan commanded. He kicked the door open, pulling Lena out first. The cold bit like knives. Tucker climbed out, grabbing a pack. The snowmobiles circled closer. Ethan turned, firing again, buying seconds. Tucker grabbed Lena's arm and pulled her toward the tree line. Ethan followed, diving behind a ridge as gunfire tore through the ice. They collapsed behind cover, gasping. Lena's teeth chattered uncontrollably. "They'll find us," she whispered. Ethan looked back toward the wreck, the snowcat sinking slowly beneath the river, flames flickering from spilled fuel. He could already see silhouettes moving toward it. He turned to Tucker. "Get her to the ranger station." "You?" Tucker asked. "I'm going to give them something else to shoot at." Tucker stared at him, eyes narrowing. "You're insane." Ethan gave a faint smile. "That's why it works." He took a deep breath, checked his last magazine, and slipped away into the storm. Minutes later, as Tucker half-dragged Lena through the forest, a bright explosion lit up the sky behind them. Ethan's distraction. Snow fell in slow, glowing arcs, painting the dark with fire. But when the echoes faded, something else rose in the distance, a second explosion, deeper, angrier, coming from the direction of the signal station. Tucker froze. "Oh, hell," he muttered. Lena's voice broke. That's where Sarah and Ben were going. The wind carried the sound of sirens and a low metallic hum that didn't belong to any aircraft Tucker had ever heard. Somewhere out there, in the white wasteland, a new force had just arrived, and Ethan was walking straight toward it. The explosion rolled across the mountains like thunder trapped under ice. Sarah Winters stumbled through the snow, clutching the small pack that contained the encrypted recorder. Her hair, once dark and neat, was tangled with frost. Her face, pale and streaked with soot, bore the strain of too many days running, too many nights awake. Beside her moved Ben Rourke, limping heavily on his injured leg, his beard dusted with snow, his breath coming in visible clouds. His eyes, brown, alert, and worn with guilt, never stopped scanning the tree line. "The station's gone," he muttered, his voice low and grim. "That wasn't an accident. Helix knew we were coming." From behind them, Rex, the German shepherd, barked once sharply. He was thinner now, his coat dirty from travel, but his golden-brown eyes burned with life. Sarah knelt and pressed a trembling hand to his neck. "Easy, boy," she whispered. The dog's ears twitched. He was listening to something they couldn't yet hear. Then came the crunch of boots through snow. Both turned. 3 figures emerged from the smoke. Helix troopers, rifles raised, visors glowing faint red. The leader, a man with a shaved head in the posture of command, stepped forward. His name patch read, Major Ellis Kane. His face was all harsh lines, his eyes the cold blue of glacier ice. Once a Marine captain, Kane had been discharged for excessive force during a civilian extraction in Mosul, a man who traded morality for efficiency. He smiled thinly now, the expression more threat than warmth. "End of the road," he said. Ben raised his pistol. "Not yet." He fired once, clipping the helmet of the nearest soldier. The man fell, but the others opened fire. Sarah dove behind a rock, clutching the recorder. Rex lunged at one attacker, his weight knocking the man down in a flurry of snow. The soldier screamed as the dog's teeth found his arm. Kane's voice cut through the chaos. "Hold your fire! Bring the woman in alive!" Sarah ran. The world narrowed to breath, sound, and white blur. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she didn't stop. Behind her, gunfire echoed, then silence, then a single scream cut short. She turned once. Ben was on his knees in the snow, blood spreading through his coat, his pistol empty. "Go!" he shouted hoarsely. "Get to Ethan!" Her heart twisted. She wanted to go back, but Rex was already at her side, barking furiously, herding her away. Another shot rang out. Ben fell forward and didn't move again. Sarah stumbled, blind with grief, as Rex led her toward the forest's edge. The wind shifted, carrying a sound, footsteps, heavy, fast, familiar. Out of the smoke strode Ethan Cole. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with ash, but his eyes burned steady. He had the look of a man who had already made peace with death and chose to keep fighting anyway. He saw Sarah and Rex and exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "You're alive," she nodded weakly. "Ben's gone. Kane's here. They know about the recorder." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then we finish this." He turned toward the ruined signal station, its antenna twisted, flames licking the edges of a collapsed wall. The firelight reflected off the snow, painting the scene in shades of gold and crimson. Through the haze, Kane appeared again, flanked by 2 soldiers. "Cole," he called, "you made quite a mess. The company wants the data, not you. Hand it over, and I'll make sure your death is quick." Ethan stepped forward slowly, rifle in hand. "You don't have the authority to make promises anymore, Kane. You're just another mercenary hiding behind a logo." Kane's smile faded. "Still the hero. Still pretending war means something." Ethan didn't answer. He raised the rifle. The shot echoed across the valley. One of Kane's men dropped instantly. The second ducked behind cover, returning fire. Sarah crouched behind a fallen beam, fumbling with the recorder. "The relay might still work," she shouted. Ethan turned slightly. "What do you need?" "A power source. Anything." He looked around, spotting the remnants of a communications console half buried in snow. "Rex!" he called. The dog bounded to him instantly. "Find the cable!" Rex dug through the wreckage, his paws scattering ash and snow. He barked once, gripping a torn wire in his teeth. Ethan connected it to the recorder's port. The screen flickered weakly. Kane saw the movement. "Stop them!" he roared. He fired, the bullet grazing Ethan's shoulder. Pain flared, but Ethan stayed upright, covering Sarah as she worked. Blood seeped through his sleeve, bright against the snow. The recorder's light turned green. "Signal active," Sarah breathed. "It's transmitting." Kane cursed, charging forward. Ethan met him halfway. The two men collided in the snow, grappling, their breaths steaming in the cold. Cain was bigger, stronger, driven by rage. He slammed Ethan down, a gloved hand closing on his throat. "You think you can stop us? Helix doesn't die, it multiplies." Ethan's vision blurred, but training and instinct fused into motion. He jammed his thumb into Cain's wound from an old scar visible at the collar, one the man must have carried since Mosul. Cain howled. Ethan rolled, grabbing a broken metal pipe, and drove it forward. The sound was final. A sharp exhale, a silence. Cain slumped, his lifeless gaze fixed on the falling snow. Sarah stood frozen, tears streaking her soot-covered face. "Ethan," he rose slowly, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "Is it out?" She looked at the recorder. Its small light blinked steadily. "Every channel, every network. The truth's gone public." Ethan nodded once. The flames were dying down now, and through the smoke, the first dawn light broke across the peaks. Rex limped to his side, fur singed, but tail still wagging faintly. Ethan knelt and pressed his forehead to the dog's. "You did good, soldier." Sarah approached, wrapping her arms around herself. "What happens now?" Ethan looked toward the valley, where the echoes of gunfire had faded. "Now the world decides what it believes, but we don't run anymore." They buried Ben near the ruins, marking his grave with a piece of twisted antenna. The rising sun painted the sky orange, and for the first time, warmth touched the snow. Later that morning, faint radio chatter came through the recovered comms, FBI frequencies, military distress calls, and finally, Marcus Hale's voice, weak but alive. "If anyone hears this, Whisper Base stands. The truth is free." Sarah smiled through her tears. Ethan looked at the horizon, the faint light reflecting in his eyes. "Then it's over," he said quietly. Rex barked once, sharp and clear, the sound echoing across the valley like an oath. Ethan looked down at him, then at Sarah. "No," he corrected himself softly. "It's just beginning." The snow fell gently again, not as a storm this time, but as peace returning. When the smoke cleared and the snow turned gold beneath the rising sun, Ethan looked back at the valley that had almost claimed them. It was quiet now, the kind of quiet that doesn't come from fear, but from grace. In that silence, he finally understood what Anya, Marcus, and even Ben had fought for, not vengeance, but truth. And truth, like faith, never dies. It only hides in the cold until someone brave enough dares to bring it back into the light. Maybe that's how God works. Not always in thunder or miracles we can see, but in the small, impossible moments. A loyal dog that never gave up, a stranger who stopped to help, a soldier who refused to surrender. The kind of miracles that walk beside us every single day disguised as courage, kindness, or love. So if you're watching this now, maybe your battlefield isn't covered in snow, and maybe your enemy isn't Helix Corp. But every heart knows what it means to fight darkness, the silence of grief, the weight of fear, the loneliness of trying to do what's right when no one's watching. Hold on. Keep walking, because even in the coldest nights, God still moves among us, sometimes through our pain, sometimes through our pets, always through love. And if this story touched your soul, don't let it end here. Share this video so that someone else can feel the warmth in its snow. Comment below where you're watching from, or who you're praying for tonight. Your town, your loved one, your story matters. And if you believe that miracles still happen in foxholes, in frozen valleys, or in broken hearts, Then subscribe and walk with us again in the next tale of hope, loyalty, and redemption. May God bless you, guide you through your storms, and remind you that even the smallest light can defy the darkest winter.